Hello everyone, welcome to our channel that takes you on an exciting journey through real-life mysteries and stories solved in the most intriguing ways. If you're a fan of captivating narratives and tales that make you rethink the world around you, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing so you won't miss any of our new content. We're thrilled to share this special story with you today. At a moment in history, there was a man whose name remains unknown, whose motives remain a mystery, and whose enigma continues to surround him with an eternal fog. A man who defied all logic, turning the sky into his own playing field, only to vanish suddenly as if he had never existed at all. His act was a boldness bordering on madness, and his escape was a testament to the brilliance of the human mind in manipulating the impossible. In 1971, he carried out one of the strangest crimes in history, leaving behind the ultimate question: was he an ordinary man, or was he a living legend? This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the man who defied time and fate, disappearing in an instant, never to leave a trace. Shadow of the Sky, the enigma of D.B. Cooper. The man who defied the impossible and vanished forever. Scene 1. Boarding Flight 305. It was the morning of November 24, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, and Portland International Airport buzzed with passengers. Families, couples, and solo travelers hurried through the airport halls. Amidst the crowds, a solitary figure caught few glances: a middle-aged man, neatly dressed in a black suit, crisp white shirt, and a black tie. He wore dark sunglasses that shielded his eyes, adding to an air of mystery. Calm and collected, he approached the ticket counter and asked for a one-way ticket to Seattle. The cashier noted his unusual request, paying $20 in cash and not showing any ID. He identified himself as Dan Cooper, a name that would soon become infamous. As he boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, he showed no signs of anxiety or nervousness. The flight attendants would later recall his unremarkable presence: a man in his mid-40s with a professional demeanor, whose only luggage was a slim black leather briefcase. He took seat 18F by the window and waited for takeoff, barely acknowledging the other passengers. He lit a cigarette as the engines roared, exhaling a plume of smoke with what seemed like silent satisfaction. Behind those dark glasses, no one could guess the carefully calculated plan forming in his mind. Scene 2. The Threatening Note. Shortly after takeoff, as the plane leveled out and passengers settled into their seats, Cooper called over flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Without speaking, he handed her a folded note, which she initially ignored, assuming it was another passenger leaving a phone number or casual message. But then, he leaned toward her, his voice low and steady. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Shocked, she opened the note, written in neat, deliberate handwriting, instructing her to sit beside him. He quietly opened his briefcase, showing her what looked like several red sticks wired to a battery, an unmistakable display meant to terrify and enforce compliance. Cooper's demeanor was calm, even cordial, as he outlined his demands with precise language: $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. Florence relayed the information to the captain, who immediately informed Northwest Airlines and, subsequently, the FBI. They scrambled to meet Cooper's requests while maintaining absolute discretion. In that tense moment, the cockpit and cabin crew understood they were trapped in a controlled, high-stakes game of compliance and negotiation with an unknown, coldly confident opponent. Scene 3: Preparation of the ransom and parachutes. Upon receiving the hijacking report, the FBI quickly set the plan in motion. At their headquarters, agents assembled $200,000 in $20 bills, meticulously recording each serial number for tracking. Cooper's demand for 4 parachutes puzzled the officials. Why 4, when he was alone? This strange request hinted he might force someone to jump with him or wanted to create a confusing trail. They provided 2 primary chutes and 2 reserve chutes to meet his exact demands. While the authorities prepared, news of the hijacking leaked to the media, causing a stir nationwide. Journalists and reporters converged on Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and speculation ran wild. Was this a desperate man, a master criminal, or something more? The public and authorities alike grappled with the mystery of his identity and intentions. Meanwhile, Cooper remained remarkably calm, ordering a bourbon and soda, sipping it slowly as though this were an ordinary day. Flight attendants noticed his strange mix of politeness and menace, an unsettling calm in the eye of a storm. Scene 4: Landing in Seattle and Cooper's inspection. Flight 305 circled over Seattle until the ransom and parachutes were ready. The passengers, unaware of the crisis, waited patiently, believing it was just a delay. When the plane finally landed, Cooper instructed the crew to taxi to a secluded area of the tarmac, away from terminals and onlookers. FBI agents watched from a distance as a Northwest Airlines employee approached the plane, carefully handing the ransom and parachutes through a rear door. Cooper examined the items methodically, scrutinizing each parachute and counting the cash to ensure it met his demands. Satisfied, he allowed the release of all 36 passengers, sparing only the flight attendants and crew. As the last passenger disembarked, the crew felt a brief sense of relief, but Cooper's instructions kept them on edge. Now, they were alone with him, unsure of what came next. His plan was still unfolding, and every move he made seemed deliberate, calculated, with no room for error. Scene 5: A new plan and flight toward Mexico. With the plane refueled, Cooper issued more demands, telling the crew to set a course for Mexico City. He specified unusual flight parameters. The plane was to fly no higher than 10,000 feet, at a slow speed, and with the landing gear and flaps set for low-altitude flight. Cooper's technical knowledge of the plane, particularly the Boeing 727's rear staircase, hinted at a meticulous understanding of its mechanics. The instructions baffled the crew and authorities alike, raising suspicions that he planned to use the rear staircase mid-flight, an unprecedented maneuver. Cooper's insistence on keeping the rear door unlocked and his choice of altitude seemed to confirm the crew's worst fears. He intended to jump. The pilot informed air traffic control, and the FBI scrambled to prepare for his next move. Fighter jets were deployed to shadow the plane from a distance, though Cooper's calm, unflinching demeanor suggested he was fully aware of his surroundings. Tension filled the cabin as the plane lifted off, its flight path aimed at the unknown. Scene 6: The legendary jump into darkness. As the plane soared over the dense forests and rugged terrain of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper took one last look at the crew, then quietly prepared himself. Just after 8 p.m., he opened the rear door, feeling the surge of freezing wind and noise from the outside. Securing the ransom bag to his body and tightening one of the parachutes, he stood on the edge, silhouetted against the night. With a final, resolute step, he leaped into the darkness below, disappearing into the thick, cold night. For those on board, the ordeal was over, but the mystery was just beginning. Back on the ground, the FBI and local authorities launched an immediate search across the estimated drop zone, a vast area of remote forests and steep mountains. They suspected he could have landed almost anywhere. Yet, as search efforts intensified, it became evident that finding Cooper, or even his belongings, would be a daunting task. Scene 7: The search begins. With the morning light, search teams spread out across the forests, rivers, and rugged landscapes spanning Washington and Oregon. Helicopters flew over miles of dense forest, while ground teams combed through possible landing sites. Every potential lead led to frustration, as no sign of parachutes, money, or personal belongings was found. Weeks turned into months, and the FBI poured resources into the investigation, questioning every witness, analyzing every clue. The public fascination with Cooper grew. His apparent skill and flawless execution made him both feared and strangely admired. Yet, despite every effort, the man seemed to have vanished without a trace. Scene 8: A decade later, the Columbia River Clue. In February 1980, nearly a decade after the hijacking, a young boy named Brian Ingram stumbled upon an old bundle of cash while digging in the sand on the banks of the Columbia River. The decaying bills were confirmed to match the serial numbers of the ransom money. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, prompting speculation. Had Cooper survived and buried part of the money to return later? Or had he drowned, leaving the money to wash ashore? The FBI re-energized the search, but the riverbank cache remained the only physical trace of Cooper ever found. It added to the legend without bringing the world closer to understanding what had happened. Scene 9: The enduring legacy of D.B. Cooper. Even after the FBI officially closed the case in 2016, the story of D.B. Cooper lived on as one of the greatest mysteries in American criminal history. Writers, documentary makers, and amateur detectives revisited every detail, each one uncovering or imagining new theories. From his precise demands to his remarkable composure, Cooper's audacious act of hijacking and escape became symbolic of a mystery that, to this day, refuses to be solved. His story continues to captivate people worldwide, inspiring countless films, books, and theories that explore the legend of the man who vanished into thin air. Each year, as more people become enthralled by the mystery, the question remains: did Cooper live to enjoy his spoils, or did he meet a fate as enigmatic as his plan? In the end, the story of D.B. Cooper remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. Decades have passed since his disappearance, yet his shadow still haunts the minds of both investigators and enthusiasts alike. Did he truly survive and vanish into the shadows forever? Or was his fate inevitable, falling victim to the harsh elements after his daring leap? The scant evidence and conflicting testimonies only fuel the speculation, but one undeniable truth remains: Cooper left behind a legacy of unanswered questions. As each year passes, the mystery continues to ignite the imagination of all, leaving the question open: will the truth ever emerge, or will this enigma continue to captivate the world? The second story. The case of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia, remains one of the most mysterious and horrific crimes in American history. Since the discovery of her body on January 7, 1947, the crime has raised numerous questions and suspicions among investigators and the public. Here are more details that uncover some of the enigmatic and fascinating aspects of this famous case. Scene 1: The early life of Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth Short was born on July 7, 1924, in Boston, Massachusetts, into a middle-class family. She was the daughter of a father named Walter Short and a mother named Valerie. In 1929, her parents divorced and the family began to live a stable life, but their world quickly turned upside down when her father left her mother in 1930. That same year, her father disappeared in a car accident and was never seen again, which led Elizabeth and her mother to face significant challenges in life. After her parents' separation, Elizabeth and her mother moved to Boston, where she grew up. As a young woman, she dreamed of becoming an actress and building a future in Hollywood. Known for her captivating beauty and charm, she failed to succeed in the film industry as she had hoped. Scene 2: Elizabeth's journey to California. In the early 1940s, Elizabeth Short moved to Los Angeles to pursue her big dream in the film industry. She dreamed of becoming a movie star in Hollywood, but despite her many attempts, she did not achieve the success she had longed for. She moved from one hotel to another, searching for opportunities to land movie roles, but she faced difficulty in securing a prominent part. Although she tried to adapt to her new life, her romantic life was unstable, as she dated several men at the same time, most of them being Hollywood figures. Elizabeth was known for living on the fringes, chasing her dreams but never truly realizing her ambitions. At times, she made money through relationships with men and tried to stay in cheap accommodations. She was a lonely, peculiar woman with a complicated past. Scene 3: The final days, the disappearance of Elizabeth Short. On January 3, 1947, Elizabeth Short vanished suddenly, and no word was heard from her for several days. At first, there was little concern about her disappearance, as she met many people and frequently visited various places in Los Angeles, so her vanishing didn't seem out of the ordinary initially. However, as days passed, her family and friends became increasingly worried. Elizabeth had not informed anyone of her plans or where she was going, which made the situation more mysterious. On January 7th, her body was discovered in a Hollywood park in Los Angeles, several miles from where she was last seen. Her body was horribly severed in half, and the scene was completely perplexing. No blood was found at the crime scene, leading investigators to believe the killer may have disposed of the body elsewhere. The body was unusually clean, which led investigators to believe the crime was meticulously planned. Scene 4. Initial investigations. Investigators were immediately dispatched to the crime scene. The body was in a tragic condition, perfectly severed in half, and it was clear that the killer knew how to handle corpses. There were incisions on the skin, indicating that the body had been carefully treated, and the deep tissues had been separated with precision, suggesting a form of medical knowledge. At the same time, the body was entirely clean, suggesting that the killer had deliberately removed any traces from the scene. The body was found in an abandoned area, far from busy roads, making it difficult to access. There were also factors that suggested the killer had avoided leaving any evidence that could identify them, whether through their handling of the body or the location they chose to leave it. Scene 5. Letters sent by the killer. After the crime, the killer began sending letters to local newspapers, in which they claimed responsibility for the crime. The letters contained details about the crime itself, as well as threats to continue killing if their demands were not met. In one of the letters, the killer stated they were not afraid of getting caught and were pleased with what they had done. One of the most controversial letters was sent to the Los Angeles Examiner, in which the killer claimed to have committed the murder and sent specific details about how the body was dismembered. These letters were filled with riddles and contained mysterious symbols that investigators were unable to fully decode. Among these symbols, the phrase JK341 appeared, a number that had no clear explanation at the time. Scene 6. Beginning of doubts and speculations. As the investigation progressed, several theories emerged about the identity of the killer. Initially, investigators believed the killer might have been a stranger or a mentally disturbed individual, but over time, other hypotheses suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with Elizabeth Short's life. Some investigators suggested that the killer could have been someone with whom Elizabeth had a relationship, and that there may have been feelings of revenge or jealousy behind the crime. However, no conclusive evidence emerged to support this theory. Others believed the killer was a stranger, with no connection to Elizabeth, who committed the crime randomly. But, as with all mysterious cases, there was no clear evidence to confirm any of these theories. Scene 7. Ongoing investigations and the appearance of JK341. Among the enigmas that baffled investigators were the letters sent by the killer. In one of the letters, the number JK341 appeared, which puzzled investigators for years. This number did not refer to anything known and seemed like a code pointing to a place or a person, but investigators could not determine its meaning precisely. These letters fueled speculation that the killer was deliberately leaving clues for the police and the public, trying to confuse and perplex them. At times, investigators suggested that the number might be linked to an organization or a group, while others believed it was simply part of a trick played by the killer to complicate the case. Over time, many of the files related to these clues were closed without any real progress. Scene 8: Continuing investigations and shattered hopes. Over the years, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's case continued, but investigators were unable to find any conclusive answers. The case underwent ongoing inquiries, but no new physical evidence emerged to solve the mystery. Witnesses pointed to several potential suspects, but no one could definitively confirm the identity of the true killer. Nevertheless, the case remained one of the most controversial in American history, and the BlackDahlia case continued to be a topic of fascination in popular culture. Scene 9: The ongoing mystery. Decades of investigation passed without the identity of the killer being revealed. The case of Elizabeth Short remained open, and the mystery persisted. There was no clear progress in identifying the killer, and the questions surrounding the crime grew as time went on. The killer vanished, leaving behind contradictory and mysterious clues, and no one could confidently claim to know their identity. Conclusion: though the BlackDahlia case may have been closed, the mystery remains unsolved. Elizabeth Short's story is one of sorrow, unanswered questions, and intrigue, leaving a legacy of continued fascination. It reminds us of the darkness that can hide in the most unexpected places, and the elusive nature of truth. As we continue searching for answers, we are reminded that some mysteries, no matter how hard we try to solve them, are destined to remain unsolved, leaving only their shadows to haunt us for generations. The third story. The beginning, a disappearance ****. On October 31, 2005, Teresa Halbach, a 28-year-old photographer, went to Stephen Avery's house to photograph a car. After that, she vanished. Her car was found abandoned, and she was never seen again. Her disappearance led to a controversial investigation and trial. Scene 1: The beginning. On October 31, 2005, Teresa Halbach, a 28-year-old photographer from Wisconsin, was working as a freelance photographer. She had contacted the Auto Trader company to photograph a car that was for sale and had an appointment with a man named Stephen Avery at his farm in Abington, a location in Wisconsin. After finishing the car shoot, she was last seen that evening leaving Avery's farm in her van. Scene 2: Teresa's disappearance. The next morning, Teresa Halbach failed to contact her family or friends as she usually did. Everyone began to worry after her sudden disappearance. Her family tried to reach her multiple times but got no response. The next day, Teresa's car was found abandoned in the Avery family driveway, which added to the concern about her mysterious disappearance. Scene 3: The first search. The police were alerted to Teresa's disappearance, and investigations began immediately. Attention turned to Stephen Avery, who had previously served an 18-year prison sentence for a sexual assault conviction that was later overturned after new evidence proved his innocence. He was considered one of the last people to have interacted with Teresa, which brought his name into the investigation. However, despite the initial investigation, no conclusive evidence was found to incriminate him, and Teresa's whereabouts remained a mystery. Scene 4. Discovery of evidence. After several days of intense searching, Teresa's car was found in the driveway of Avery's farm, and the case became even more mysterious. The police began searching the farm and collected samples from the surrounding area. They found traces of blood and body parts of Teresa nearby. Upon examining the evidence, some clues indicated that Teresa may have been killed inside the farm. Other items linked to the incident, such as her keys and personal belongings, were also found. Scene 5. The arrest of Stephen Avery. On November 9, 2005, Stephen Avery was arrested on suspicion of being involved in Teresa Halbach's murder. He was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and evidence tampering after physical evidence linked him to the crime. Despite Avery maintaining his innocence, the physical evidence and witness testimonies against him led to accusations of his involvement in the murder. Scene 6. The trial of Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery's trial began in 2007, with the defense arguing that the evidence found at Avery's farm had been tampered with. There were claims that the police fabricated the evidence to convict him after he was released earlier due to the wrongful sexual assault conviction. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence, including DNA found in the car and on the body. Scene 7. Surprises in the case. As if the case weren't complicated enough, other surprises emerged. During the investigation, it was revealed that Stephen Avery's nephew, Brendan Dassey, who was 16 years old at the time, had been involved in the case. After extensive questioning by the police, Brendan made contradictory statements about what happened that night, leading the judge to charge him with involvement in the crime. Scene 8. New investigations and doubts. Over time, new questions arose about how the evidence was handled and processed. There was criticism of the investigation methods, and allegations surfaced that the police may have planted false evidence against Avery. This included personal items found on his property. Concerns were also raised about how Brendan Dassey was interrogated, with many arguing that his statements had been extracted unlawfully. Scene 9. The verdict and decision. In the end, Stephen Avery was convicted of first-degree murder based on the evidence and testimonies presented in court. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Brendan Dassey was sentenced to 40 years. The case became widely controversial due to the handling of the evidence and the progression of the investigation. Scene 10. Ongoing questions. Despite the conviction of Avery and Dassey, the case continues to raise many questions. Many of Avery's supporters argue that the investigation was flawed and that the evidence was questionable. In 2015, a legal team launched a campaign to highlight mistakes made during the investigation and trial, which led some to call for reopening the case. Scene 11. The Making a Murderer series. In 2015, the Netflix series Making a Murderer aired, presenting Stephen Avery's story and raising questions about how the criminal justice system handled his case. The series sparked a huge public debate and led to campaigns calling for a review of the case. This campaign became a turning point in the public's interest in the case, leading to more discussions about whether Stephen Avery had been fairly convicted. Scene 12. The case remains open. To this day, the case of Teresa Halbach and Stephen Avery remains unresolved in many aspects. Questions about how the crime occurred and how the investigation and trial were conducted continue to stir debate among the public, the judicial system, and society at large. Hope for justice wavers between uncertainty, ensuring that the case remains one of the most contentious and discussed in modern American history. This narrative provides a comprehensive look at the Teresa Halbach and Stephen Avery case, from its beginning to the present moment, offering insights into the developments of the case and its impact on American society. The Boy in the Box Mystery, the full story of Philadelphia's most puzzling crime. In the early morning hours of February 1957, a chilling discovery was made in a secluded wooded area on the outskirts of Philadelphia. A small, battered cardboard box, left carelessly in the underbrush, contained the lifeless body of a young child. Barely 6 years old, the boy had been cruelly abused, his body showing signs of neglect and violence. With no identification and no clue as to his identity, this tragic discovery became one of the most perplexing and haunting mysteries in American crime history. The case, known as The Boy in the Box, has captivated the public for decades, as investigators and the public alike have searched for answers that seem to evade them at every turn. Despite numerous leads, theories, and advances in forensic technology, the identity of the boy and the truth behind his death remain unknown to this day. This is the story of a child whose fate remains shrouded in mystery, a story that continues to haunt the city of Philadelphia and the hearts of those who seek to uncover the truth. Scene 1. A grim morning in the woods. On a chilly February morning in 1957, frost covered the city of Philadelphia. Two young boys decided to explore the nearby woods, looking for adventure. Nature often invited them into its mysteries. The forest was full of dense shrubs and intertwined trees, creating dark corners and hidden spots that sparked their curiosity. As they walked slowly between the trees, one of the boys spotted a battered cardboard box discarded strangely among the grass and trees. The box looked old, covered in mud and water stains as if it had been left there for some time. It seemed so out of place in the forest, increasing the boy's curiosity and sparking an overwhelming desire to uncover what was inside. One of the boys approached the box cautiously, his eyes fixed on it, while his friend stood behind him, watching intently. As he got closer, he noticed a strange and unpleasant smell emanating from the box. It was a scent that mixed mold with something else, something he couldn't quite place, perhaps the smell of death. The boy felt a chill of fear but decided to continue. Slowly, he lifted the flimsy lid to see what lay inside. Scene 2. The moment of shock and horror. When the boy finally opened the box, the scene before him took his breath away. Inside lay the lifeless body of a young child, entirely naked and seemingly no older than 6. The child's frail body was covered with bruises and visible wounds, some fresh, others old, indicating prolonged abuse. The child had been wrapped in an old, dirty blanket, seemingly used to cover his small body after his death. The boys stared at each other in shock, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Paralyzed by terror, they finally turned and fled, unsure how they would ever explain the horrific scene they had just witnessed. Scene 3. Reporting to the police and the arrival of the investigation team. Days passed, filled with hesitation and fear, before one of the boys finally had the courage to tell adults what he had seen in the woods. The police quickly arrived on the scene, accompanied by a team of specialized investigators and forensic experts. Officers cordoned off the area around the box, carefully examining every item in sight. The lead investigator stepped forward and gently lifted the box's lid, casting a brief glance at the child's small body inside. His face registered a mix of shock and anger as he gazed upon a young body that bore the evidence of prolonged suffering and neglect. The forensics team carefully took the blanket and the box for analysis, hoping they might contain clues that could lead them to the child's identity or to whoever had abandoned him. Scene 4. Forensic examination of the body. The body was taken to forensic labs, where a team of doctors and experts examined the child thoroughly. The examinations revealed that the boy was malnourished, weighing less than the average for his age. Doctors also observed marks around his wrists and ankles, suggesting he had been bound for extended periods, as if he had been held captive under inhumane conditions. His body was marred with multiple bruises, and his face bore marks from repeated blows, indicating ongoing physical abuse. The autopsy showed that he had been struck days before his death, and other signs revealed a life filled with neglect and cruelty. Scene 5. The police's effort to identify the child. Police decided to release the child's approximate likeness through local media, pleading for the public's help in identifying him. Newspapers carried photos of the boy and his story, along with urgent appeals from the police for any information that might help solve this tragic mystery. The police received dozens of calls from people who thought they recognized the boy or believed they had seen him before, but most leads ended up being false trails. The police continued gathering information, but they could not uncover anything that would lead them to his family or any relatives. As the investigation dragged on, officers began feeling helpless. There were no fingerprints, no marks, nothing that could identify the child or shed light on how he came to such a tragic end. Scene 6. Exploring new clues and police theories. The investigation expanded to include missing children reports not only in Philadelphia but also in neighboring states. Investigators suspected the child might have been transported from another state or perhaps held captive far from anyone who might recognize him. They examined the box and blanket for any fingerprints or hairs that might lead them to the culprit, but after days of analysis, forensic testing yielded no clear clues. Investigators developed several theories about the crime, believing that the boy might have been a victim of human trafficking or subjected to abuse by a cruel family. Many families with histories of child abuse were investigated, but no progress was made. As time passed, the case grew more complex, and the mystery surrounding the child's fate deepened. Scene 7. The open-ended mystery and its impact on the city. Months turned into years, and The Boy in the Box became a haunting mystery for detectives and the community alike. Despite the exhausting efforts, the police couldn't find any conclusive evidence to reveal the child's identity or solve the mystery of his death. The boy was finally laid to rest in a small cemetery with a simple gravestone reading, "The Unknown Child," and his grave became a place where people left flowers and messages. His story became a symbol of sorrow and unanswered questions, as decades passed without any solution to the Boy in the Box case. His death remained one of Philadelphia's most harrowing and unsolved crimes, leaving behind a lingering question: who was the child, and how did his life end in such tragedy? The end, the unsolved mystery. Years passed since the case of The Boy in the Box, but the mystery surrounding this crime never left the city. Investigations continued, but no new evidence emerged to help solve the puzzle. Many legal and medical teams, including specialists in complex cases, tried to resolve the case but failed to uncover the truth. It seemed as if all doors had closed, and the story had become one of the unsolved mysteries that lingered in the memory of Philadelphia. In 1998, after 41 years since the body was found, a surprising development occurred. A new team of investigators decided to reopen the case using new DNA testing techniques. After taking samples from the remains and conducting advanced tests, they discovered that the child might have been abused early in life, and a potential genetic link to a local family was found. However, despite many efforts, they could not identify the child's family or the perpetrator. In 2002, a retired investigator revealed a theory suggesting that the child may have been kidnapped from a certain family or possibly was a victim of a more complex crime whose details had never been uncovered. As time went on, some began linking the case to similar cases in other areas, offering a glimmer of hope that the mystery could eventually be solved. But ultimately, the case of The Boy in the Box remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American crime history. The grave in the unknown cemetery in Philadelphia continues to be a place where people visit in silence, leaving flowers in memory of the child who lived a short and painful life, whose identity or fate no one knows. Over time, the case became a symbol of sorrow and confusion, turning into an urban legend for the city itself, which still wonders about the fate of this child, and what led him to his tragic end in that box. As the years go by, it seems that the truth was buried with the child in the same grave, and the questions will chase them forever.